second reading this morning comes from the Gospel according to Luke, from the 15th chapter, verses 1 through 3 and 11 through 32. Now, all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to the father, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now, his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead, and he has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" This is the word of the Lord. You ever lost anything? You ever lost anything that you needed so badly that you took your house and turned it upside down trying to find it? What did you do when you finally found it? You put the whole house back together, right? But you were pretty excited that you finally found it, right? Now, any of you have precious family heirlooms? You have a lot of this history of your family that you take with you? Anyone ever moved? Anyone ever packed up everything they have and moved it from one house to another? Have you ever found everything that you packed up and moved from one house to another? How many people are still missing things from 5 moves ago? How many people are sure that they're in one of the boxes that you have moved 5 or 6 times? We get to that point, though, sometimes, right, where important things, we take good care of them and we pack them away or we put them. My favorite is I put something in a place that I know I will never, ever forget where it is because it is the perfect place to put it. And when I find that remote control owl, I will let you know. We get to this point, there are things that are important to us, and we want to carry them with us. We hold them dear, but one of the things we also do is we pack them away tightly. We almost hide them away, really, because they're so important. And I thought about this recently. One of my classmates serves a church up in Nebraska, and they were one of the towns hit really hard by the flooding recently. Their church, and they live in the church's manse, are the highest point in the town, okay? And they ended up with 18 inches of water in their basement. And fortunately, the church didn't get hit too hard because a couple of loving elders spent several days sandbagging around the church as best they could. Now, I didn't say that they escaped everything, but was definitely not as bad as it could have been. But that tells you something, right? The highest point of the town still flooded, right? Well, one of the things that happened for them was they realized that they were going to have flooding. And so they started picking stuff up off the floor in the basement. And they put things up on top of other boxes, on tops of shelves, and whatever they could do. Really important, irreplaceable things, right? And the hardest thing that happened was when they finally got home to realize that the water had gotten high enough to lift the bottom tubs, the waterproof tubs, off the floor. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with stacking tubs, but if the bottom one gets unsteady, you know what happens? They all come tumbling down, right? So all the stuff that they had spent all this time making sure would be up and out of the water fell in the water. The fact that there was water in the house didn't hurt them. But the fact that the things that they thought they had protected still got damaged is what hurt. The stuff that they knew they couldn't replace. And it's going to be a while for them as they continue their cleanup, and they'll find things as they continue to clean up. And there will be some rejoicing, but there's also going to be this harsh sorrow. And I started thinking about that more and more this week. This is what happens to so many of us when things like this happen, right? Think about all the people who have been affected by a tornado, lost everything. Think about all the people recently who have lost everything to a wildfire. There are things that they can never get back. How do you rejoice when those things can't come back? Well, it takes turning life around a little. It takes turning it around to realize that there is still something to be joyful about, that there is still something to cling to hold on to, and be thankful for. But there's still some way that reconciliation can happen, that you can still have what you truly need. But it's also a reminder for many of us that some of the things that we hold on to too much are actually what poison us, right? We talk about having possessions, right? Because we possess them. But have you ever thought about the times when our possessions are what possess us? that's one of the challenges that we struggle with. And I think it's one of the realities that we hear in today's story. We get so caught up in wanting to have what is right in front of us that sometimes we forget what it's really all about. Sometimes we work so hard for the things that are right in front of us that we forget that they're also there to enjoy. See, the older brother in this story, the older brother struggles with this concept. The older brother has everything he needs. He has everything he could possibly want. But he never enjoys it. He never takes advantage of all the work that he's doing, and all he thinks he's doing is working, and not receiving anything. But he misses the point. He misses the point that he already has received. It's all right there. It's all for him to take and to use. It's there for him to enjoy. I'm going to go back to one of the things I've said before as Christians. This goes back to Jesus' miracle of turning the water into wine. And it's a concept that we who have received so much from God, we should be throwing the best parties. Why? Because everything we've got's from God. And God wants us to use it and enjoy it. God didn't give us a creation and say, now, stand still and don't do anything. God gave us a creation and said, be good stewards of it. Use these resources wisely. Make some food and eat it. Enjoy it. Celebrate. Have a party. We should be throwing the best parties because we're able to do that. We should be hosting people all the time because we're able to do that. That's the beauty of what we've been trying to do the last few years to make this building more accessible and more used. We should be having everyone in the community in this building all the time, welcoming to come and eat with us, to celebrate and to have joy. We should be welcoming people to come in and share their sorrows and their hurts. Sit with them. Because this is a gift we have from God. This isn't a gift that we built up for ourselves. It's a gift that God allowed us to put together so that we might make the kingdom known. But if we start having the idea of the brother, we start thinking about we're working so hard just to maintain so that we can have what we have here. And we don't enjoy it. It becomes work. And we lose focus of what it's for. Now, there's a couple of things that we really love about this story, right? And that's the Father receiving the Son. We love that because that's what we want to be. We want to be that Son that's received by Jesus even when we mess up. But here's the thing. The story isn't about us messing up and always being received back. The story is about how we should be celebrating when those who have been lost are found. How we should be celebrating when those who have broken away from God are returned to God. How we should be celebrating when we welcome someone who doesn't know God to come and journey with us, to meet Christ, to walk with Christ, to wrestle and struggle with what it means to be a faithful disciple. Now, the lectionary is great because it gets us an opportunity to read lots and lots of different stories of the Bible, but like today, sometimes we skip over things. So we're going to have a quick quiz, and you got to close your Bibles, put down your phones, can't cheat. I started at verse 1, and I skipped from verse 3 to the second half of verse 11. What did I skip over? The lost sheep and the lost coin, right? What are those two stories about? Celebrating finding the lost, right? The shepherd will leave the 99 to go find the one, and will celebrate when he brings that one back. The woman will tear apart her home to find the one coin, even though she still has the 9. And what happens when she finds that one coin? She probably spends all 10 to throw a party about it. Maybe that's what the problem is we're not thinking like the Father enough. We're thinking too much like the older brother. But God, we've always been here. You haven't thrown us any parties. God looks at us and goes, but you've always been here. You've always had what I have. It's always been yours to use. You've looked at it wrong. God looks at us and says, look, there are those who don't know me, those who have walked away from me. You need to be rejoicing when they walk in. You should be throwing great parties for them constantly. And I mean, think about this. We're not talking about just a little party. We're talking about the best piece of meat that you've been preparing and using that for the party. The biggest and the best. Because what we're talking about in coming back to God is the difference of life and death. It's a celebration about what the kingdom is about. The kingdom isn't about us working to maintain what is there. The kingdom is about working so that others may share in its bounty. Maybe what we miss is what the brother missed too. That the Father gave away half, and yet still there remains plenty. In God, there is no shortage of what can be given. There is no shortage of grace. There is no shortage of salvation. There is nothing that we have to work to hold on to because it's limited. It's not a piece of pie that if we let other people share it, we're not going to have as much. God is an amazing baker. And every time we take a slice of pie, it's replaced. There's still more for others. So let's throw that party. But let's also be mindful that our work in the fields is to go out and to find the lost, to do the work of reconciliation and making Christ known. A little bit of that work leads to the bigger part of fun, where we get to celebrate, enjoy. And if any of you don't like to party, you can stand up and leave right now, please.